a celebrity that Hazza gets confused with. Maybe. Anyway, yeah, something that I want to touch on straight away, Tom and Anderzz both. This was a complete coincidence, by the way. Totally not the whole reason why I got you on this podcast. Why do your names end with double Z? I'll go with you first, Tom.
Because my surname is Bissmire, but if anybody reads it, they read it Bissmire, and it pisses me off. So I changed it to Zeds. So they say Tombizz, which is what I'd like it to be.
Nice. Forced it. Mine
You,
is way less rational. It's because when I made the username, I was like an edgy 12-year-old.
Anderzz!
Literally. That is quite literally the logic, yeah.
Well, it's way better than how I came up with ExWarrior, but we'll leave it as that. We're not going into that topic. But yeah, let's
ExWarrior underscore. Don't forget. It's a piece of
underscore. Sure. In some places, it's with one R, which you've called me out for before, Tom.
Spell your name correctly.
Yeah, I can't spell. But yeah, let's introduce this podcast correctly. Skill Issues, the show all about esports, gaming, and everything in between. I've just found what Tom changed in the document. We've got a document for the topics, and I've just found what Tom changed. Like he was trying to tell me that he was going to delete everything, but eventually just made a little change.
It's a really important edit.
It's a very important change. Let's leave it at that. Today's topics, we'll be doing our weekly roundup as usual, talking about Disney applying.
He's rattled already.
I'm doing a great start. We're killing it. Yeah.
We can edit this out in post, don't worry.
Sure, it's totally not live. Disney acquiring Epic Games. We'll be talking about Team Spirit winning IEM Katowice. Talking about the Valorant Esports Hub as well. Those are our weekly items. But then we'll be talking about the cool stuff. VCT kicking off. And because we've got a very key guest today, Anderzz, our coach leading world strategy coach. Well, I try to blend a lot of words together there, and they just didn't come out right. But yes, we'll be talking about game strategy and game theory and all that kind of jazz. But yeah, before we get started, I'd like to give an intro to you guys. I obviously know who you guys are, but if in a sentence you could guys let me know, like, or let everybody else watching know, who the hell are you? Anderzz, could you go first?
Yeah. I'm Martin Anderzz Schelasin. I've been sort of bouncing around the Valorant sphere since early beta, and I'm an international title-winning strategic coach, previously working with teams like Version 1 and Fnatic.
Awesome.
I'm Durka. I'm a professional player for Fnatic. And I've won multiple trophies in 2023.
He's also a Ouur aficionado. Yeah.
It's opposite day. Okay, Tom, go again.
My name is Tom, and I am a VCT commentator, or maybe because EMEA hasn't done an announcement yet.
Cool. And analyst. And yeah, sometimes indeed. Yeah, we brought you both on, see what you got to say for various topics, but without any further ado, let's walk into our weekly roundup. First things first, Disney acquired Epic Games like they do always. Disney acquires something new every single time. Now, for Epic Games, it seems from their announcement, they've acquired them for the goal of creating games that sort of give more to their franchises, already existing franchises, give them a little bit more value, trying to get more money out of it. Now, in your eyes, guys, there's Disney games out there already. Is this good, bad? Finally, we see some good news, some things that are changing. Is it good that Disney have gone in this direction? Anderzz, I'll go with you first.
I mean, just intuitively, it makes sense, right? If we look at sort of Epic Games' MO, like their claim to fame at this point is how well integrated they can bring in external IPs to their systems. And so if I'm Disney, I'm sitting on the largest cache of easily capitalizable intellectual property probably in the entire history of media. Why would I not go this route if I was trying to expand my presence in the gaming space? It's actually just the no-brainer, right?
Yeah,
give me Star 100%. Wars games. That's all I want. Just give me more Star Wars games, and I'm happy. I've enjoyed the last few that have been released. I don't want them to really go down the Battlefront road anymore because I feel like they've just made those worse as they go along. But give me some single player games and I'm a happy bunny.
All right. Not a fan of Ubisoft then, considering they were the ones running the...
one of the worst platforms in existence. If you ever, this is something fun. If you ever buy, and if you're ever in another country and you buy a game on Epic that runs through Ubisoft, just make sure whatever country you're in, you speak the language, because they will region lock or language lock your games. Which so I now have some Ukrainian only games, which
no,
a little bit fun to
all
play.
according to plan.
I talked to their support team, and they were like, the only thing you could do is refund it back through Epic, and then you could buy it again on our platform. And I was like, oh, you guys are sick. Thanks, guys.
Nailed it.
There's no way.
Yeah.
I just noticed, Harry, on the bottom you wrote on the topic, Disney X Epic Games Cinematic Universe, the DEGCU. Shout out to Harry producing the DGCU. That's a mouthful for sure. Cool. We'll leave it at that. That's weekly item number 1. Going into the second one, it's Team Spirits have won the IM Katowice, and one of their players, Donk, 17 years old, his debut on a major tournament as well. IM Katowice, by the way, one of the biggest Counter-Strike events of the year. It's exciting, right? Because you've got young players getting to the finals. Not only in the finals, they win. They've got character. They've got charisma. They also shout a lot. Now, I just wanted to get your insights to this, guys. Especially Anderzz here. You've coached before, obviously more onto the strategical side on the highest levels, but you've also had some more experience, dealing with players as a main coach. How easy is it to work with, youngsters like this that can get very excitable, very loud, very emotional? Give us your thoughts around dealing with players of that style.
I mean, it really depends, right? Like no one player is going to be the same as the next. And in spite of players like appearing excitable or loud or like ultra emotional externally, like that may underpin something that's completely different, like on an internal level. Like, I mean, I would say that you can look at someone like Alpha and like look at clips of him at lock-in during the Icebox comeback, and like he is clearly hyped once he realizes the gears are turning. But like his internal mentality is still very killer and locked down. Like he's a competitor. And so I think that some of these young players will sort of have behaviors that aren't necessarily revelatory of the actual mentality that's beneath it. But some will. And sort of feeling out where that player's actual mentality resides is sort of the key to working with players like that. Obviously in this case, I mean, regardless of which one Donk is, like, kid goes crazy.
Okay, on Tom's side, I know from a broadcaster perspective, you always love running stories of this is the rookie, this is the guy that a lot of people will have as someone to look out for, but you never expect them to have the capability of closing out games in the way that this person has. So yeah, go ahead.
For them, for Spirit especially, I think whoever, I didn't actually see the game, but I know that whoever was casting that game probably at the time of their life, because it was just storyline city. Like you had Donk, who basically I think broke pretty much every record as a rookie, which includes like players like Simple, Ouur, like whoever you name it. He also matched up to some of their actual LAN statistics, which was just truly absurd. But then you also have players like Shiro, obviously taking a pretty big risk, switching away from that Cloud9 roster, going into this Spirit roster and almost winning immediately, like going into Katowice. And also, like, I've attended a Katowice back in 2019. It's one of those special venues. Like that and Cologne, like even if you have the major somewhere else in the world, those two events are just synonymous with Counter-Strike. So to come in as a rookie and win that event, like you've put your name on the map immediately. Like there's no better way to do it.
Yeah, and you mentioned storylines. If you look on the flip side, Carrigan playing on FaZe, again, this was his 4th grand final. And he, again, couldn't close this out. And you could definitely tell from the emotions there. He's been around for a while, right? We're talking about a player that he does... He's the GOAT IGL.
He's fantastic.
Yeah. And for him to get here, he doesn't know if he'll have that opportunity again, right? So you can tell how much this means to this person. You know, it's building up years and years of practice to get to this point, and then eventually getting dunked on by a 17-year-old called Donk is quite the storyline. Yeah, Anderzz, you've won a major championship before.
Sure have.
Under the strategic coach position,
Mm-hmm.
well, you know, how close to the players are you in terms to their emotions and stuff? I can imagine it isn't as attached as the main coach, right?
Definitely not. I mean, it's kind of interesting because I've worked in like every capacity in coaching staffs at this point, excluding performance coaching. Like, I head coached in collegiate, where I was literally the everything. I head coach in North American Tier 2 and in Game Changers. I've assisted and strategic coach in Tier 1 and franchise level. So I've been like literally every level of the totem pole and seen every sort of incremental change in the granularity of player interaction. At the strategic coaching level, you're not dealing with a lot of player emotion. This is mostly like I build playbooks that people can't beat is more or less my job. And then I funnel that through the head coach, maybe do some level of like one-on-one with players to make sure that very specific like nuances are understood by the players to make sure that things work the way that they do. But I would say that like a lot of the emotionality and the like performance psychology side of it isn't part of the purview anymore.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. With that, I think it's good to wrap up this item and go into the next one. The Valorant Esports Hub has been re-implemented on the Valorant game. So it's been there before, but it's come back. It looks like it's got new features. It looks really good. You know, it's got a lot of information, whether that's for individual leagues, whether that's about the global events as well. It's got dates, it's got the players, it's got the teams. How much did you want this, Tom? How much was this necessary in your life?
Well, I would say for me it's necessary because I know when all the all the Valorant's happening anyway. Like, I don't need to go to my main menu. But it's fantastic for like more casual viewers. Like, if you're gonna just click on and go, okay, there's a game this day. I don't have to know all of the different websites online. I want them to do what Counter-Strike does with a major though, where it pops up that little window and forces you to listen to me if I'm casting an event. I want that. Like, I remember launching the game and just like my good friends Harry and Hugo listened to them and going, "Shut the fuck up, Harry! Like, I'm trying to, I'm trying to play Counter-Strike here. I don't need to hear you." But no, I think that it's good. I think anything that directly goes to the consumer and promotes the esports side of things is only going to be good for a game.
What about you, Anderzz? What's your thoughts on that?
I'm in a super similar vein, right? Like, at the end of the day, it's easy for us to be a little bit myopic as to our own perspectives on it. It's like, we're deep in the esports stuff, so we love the esports stuff. But how many, like, what percentage of the Valorant player population actually follows the esports on a day-to-day basis or like a week-to-week basis even? And creating another touch point for them that's closer to their like normal operations that can potentially pull them into the fold is never going to be a negative. I'm also like a decade-long user of the Valorant of the League of Legends esports website, like LoL Esports, and so to see sort of Valorant's rough equivalent of that sort of coming into its own in like a really well executed way is cool to see.
So you mentioned here, Tom, the fact that you remember the Counter-Strike hub existing, and that's something that you remember, and you'd like that iteration of it, or at least get close to that to be implemented. Is that something that also got you into esports to begin with, or are you just a lot older than that and probably not?
I don't know. I feel like it's possible that maybe one of the first times I saw stuff, because I was definitely playing CSGO before I was like watching it. Like, it was just that I got into it over time. But I think a lot of that was more, I just fell in love with the game, and eventually you go onto like YouTube and different platforms, and then you somehow get led down the road of esports. I don't necessarily think it was the hub, but
Okay.
I do think over time the fact that, yeah, you actually almost get forced a little bit to see some bits, I think is good, because yeah, it just gets different people interested. I'm sure there's many people who have like maybe clicked on some of the matches in the game and just been taken to this page and got to see some cool events.
Yeah, I think the introduction for esports for me was 2013 or 2014, when in League of Legends, in the same client, there was an esports hub of sorts, and it was right before the World Championship, and it linked me to Warriors of Imagine Dragons, and that key moment got me.
And then you never watched esports ever again.
Immediately left.
Yeah, that got me obsessed with Imagine Dragons and was like, never watching esports again, guys. But yeah, that got me interested. Wait, there's an esport behind this. There's big teams around this. I somehow knew it already existed, but I think that's where I kind of got into it, where I started watching broadcasts, when I started becoming fan of the esports. So I guess this definitely works. And if new players come in, more casual players see that hub and get interested a bit and get curious and press a link and watch a stream, that's what this, I guess, is all for. But in the meantime, there was a lot of criticism around this as well from the community. Some players, some esporters were sort of complaining, okay, this has been esporters.
That's one hell of a word.
Some more passionate members of the community, I'd say, were complaining about where is the replay system, because this has been something that Valorant have, or at least Riot Games have promised. It hasn't been implemented yet. People saying it's late, people saying it's useful. A replay system, like if anybody's played Counter-Strike, GoTV, or for League of Legends, you being able to watch your games in real time and find multiple perspectives of that game, that hasn't been implemented in Valorant. Now, Tom, for you, is this something you'd want implemented, and how important is this for you?
I'm obviously very biased because as a commentator, being able to create like different POV videos and just like see different things from the client is always going to be super beneficial to my job. And I think especially with like content creators who like maybe make frag movies or reels, or even just people who might not necessarily have the capabilities of recording stuff while they're playing, if you don't have the best like tech available to you, this stuff's always going to be super useful. But like I said, I'm hella biased with my opinions because I know I'll use it, but whether or not others will is another thing altogether.
Anderzz, for you, we kind of touched on the topics before we got on air.
We talked about this in the
I could
pre-chat.
feel some fumes there.
I have a much more incensed opinion on this, which is like, it's pretty undeniable that like if we had a replay system, would it be great for the people who would use it? Absolutely. Then you have to ask yourself, how many people are actually going to use this? Because like yeah, I would too. To be fair, like
Pavlos,
I'm raising my hand as well.
I would 100%. There we go. 100% of people on this.
Yeah. My whole thing is like,
right, 100%.
For as vocal as people are when they're like whining about wanting this replay system, it is an astronomically selfish and out of touch take to be asking for it as much as they do. Because if you look at the total Valorant player base, how many people are going to use a replay system? It is a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a percent of people. So to ask for resource allocation to develop an incredibly complex system that's layered on top of the game client, that's then going to be used by like effectively none of the player population if you want a round. Like, let's be real. Like, that's a little asinine. And like, yes, it's going to create like really higher quality content, but at the same time, like content creation, it hasn't ceased to exist without it. So like, what's the incremental value? Is it worth the like allocation of time and resources to get the replay system up and running? There's also like the question of even whether or not it's good for competitive integrity. There are people on both sides of that where it's like, would it help competition? Would it hurt competition? Where there's so much like ambiguity and gray area around the value of it as like a universal. I think asking for it and sort of almost having an attitude of entitlement towards it is a little bit egregious. Like, if we get it, awesome. If we don't get it, I'm frankly not bothered. I would much rather they put those resources to something that is an overall like healthier value to the progress of the game and the retention of players.
He wants an RPG in the game. That's what he wants.
Yeah, definitely. Exactly.
So this is basically from a business perspective that you're thinking about it, right? Like
this is my private
equity,
equity
time
leaking
allocation.
through.
But from a business standpoint, you think Riot, as you're managing this product. If you have to spend time and money into something, this is not something that needs to be worked on straight away.
Yeah, the ROI here is like so low that it is in the abyss in terms of the priority list. Like, it's just not anywhere near the top.
I just had to think for a second. ROI, return on investment, right?
Yes. Sorry.
Good,
Again,
good.
like this is what happens when. Yeah, my bad.
No. That's totally fine. That's totally fine. Please assume that we're smart.
Why are you saying where? I knew what that meant. Don't
I was
lump
gonna
me
say
in with you.
No, I knew what it was, but my brain lagged for a bit. Okay.
I know you could say you.
Yeah. Okay. Because we
Your
can
Harry
see your
didn't get it,
brain,
you're
Tom,
fine. You
doesn't
can say
mean you're
we.
smart. All right, cool. So I think now we can jump into our main topic, which ties in nicely with the last one, because essentially what the Valorant Esports Hub kind of tries to get out to the world, really, and advertise is the kickoff of VCT, which is actually called, the stage is actually called VCT Kickoff, the Valorant Champions Tour, rather. It's the start of it. It's been a long off season. It's been since August since we've had a official broadcast, an official tournament of sorts. Tom, let me know, how excited, how relieved are you? We're getting started soon, about a week.
Oh, I'm always excited for Valorant. Like, I didn't move to Berlin for nothing. Let's put it that way. I'm definitely getting ready to sort of look at some of the teams. I think the fun thing about these sort of events is no matter how much preparation I'll do to be ready for them, I'm never going to be ready because we got brand new players, brand new teams. The last patch that was played, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was 7.02 was the last patch that was played at Champs. We are now going into 8.02, so it's like there's been a million different updates. Sky's been murdered, Jet's been murdered, so there's so much potential, and Icebox is still exactly the same.
And this for you?
Lots of the same sentiment. It's like I'm in the trenches day in, day out with this game, and the actual competition is sort of the lifeblood that keeps that passion going. So to have events finally coming around the corner that feel like they're pushing for that top level of competition and will sort of keep the inspiration, the creative juices going, and sort of my personal drive to want to compete at its peak is never something I'm going to be sad about. Like, if the competition never stopped all year round, I would never get burnt out. I would never get bored of it. But I understand that that's an unrealistic expectation.
Players may die, but
exactly.
I'm okay with it.
Players may die, but it's a sacrifice of. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, okay, so let's get into the specifics here, because there's a reason we brought you in, kind of get an insight to your professional life and how it all ties together. What does the start of kickoff mean to you as a strategic coach here, Anderzz?
Well, so I'm currently teamless, so it doesn't mean a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
It means sort of the same thing as the off season, unfortunately, which is me putting in like anywhere from 8 to 12-hour days, continuing to build playbooks that are ultimately not going to get used by anyone. I just have them just in case, sort of thing. And like that's ultimately like the whole of it, to be honest. Like I'll watch every single game from every single region, same as I always do. That's not necessarily including tier 2. I don't have like time warping abilities.
4 leagues now. Even that will be difficult.
It's not horrible. You just have to understand. Like, you can never watch a VOD at normal speed. It's actually just.
I was about to say, if you're not watching it 2 times, you're
no.
insane.
I either do 2 times, or if 4 times is available, I'm comfortable watching at 4x. So I'll do that a lot of the time. And so like I'll watch every game from every single partner league.
You
and
still
then...
leave my commentary on though, right?
Yes. That's it's like serenading me every time I VOD review. It's perfect. So I'll like watch every single league, and I'll continue building playbooks. I'll continue trying to make sure that I have the most up-to-date understanding of like where the meta currently is sitting, how I would want to attack it if I were able to attack it, and just stay in a position where, like, the way that I often describe it to people is if I'm going to go teamless into this split, what I want to happen is when teams get to the end of this split and they need someone to put out fires, I'm the person that they call to do that.
So you'll often find more work towards the end of the season then?
There are definitely like distinct breakpoints. It's like I either want to get in at the start of an off season, which I think if I were to look at where I can personally provide the most value, you want to bring me in like immediately when an off season starts. Not because I'm a particularly good player scout or like talent scout or anything like that, but because I'm a complex systems guy. A lot of my strategy is based on like deeply developed protocols, playbooks that already have multiple layers of like preemptive planning built into them, so they're just better insulated than the average team's reactions to certain like setups, certain maps, etc. And putting those systems into place is not something you're going to do in 2 weeks. It's just not. You've got to give me some form of runway to get this playbook implemented and to iterate through those protocols a little bit with the players to make sure that there's a like effective understanding. And so you either want to bring me in like at the beginning of an off season so we can get all of these systems implemented, or at the end of a season, you want to bring me in because I can then look at a season's worth of sample of how you've reacted and basically fine tune your protocols. It's basically, do I want to develop the protocols ahead of time, or do I want to retroactively say, this is where your protocols collapse and this is how we can fix them before an LCQ, before an international, etc.
As Anderzz agent, I'd like to say when he says 2 weeks notice, he means 3 days notice, just for any teams watching this broadcast.
We all need an agent in our lives.
Yeah.
Now this is something, Tom, you can jump on to as well. But first, Anderzz, do you think the fact that there's a lack of interest in developing this very deep strategical book early on is down to teams not really figuring out what is the best strategy to find success all year round? Or is it more of an investment standpoint? Is it because there's lack of money and, you're trying to find the necessary staff first? Because in your eyes, I'm sure this is a very necessary part of a puzzle in a team, right? But do you think that for many, this is an oversight?
I think that, like, to all of your points, it's kind of an all of the above situation. Like, full transparency, I had multiple partnership level teams reach out to me this offseason. In all but one case, the thing that blew it up was their budget disappearing. Like, they were actively saying, we want to bring you on. Oh, wait, we have no money. Like, that's just how the cookie crumbles a lot of the time. And the other one that wasn't because of that was because of relocation reasons. They ultimately, like, wanted someone local, and I just was not going to do that at the time. So, like, that's definitely a consideration. The other consideration is, again, a term that like is very much ingrained in the way that I approach things from my time in finance, which is a lot of the times when you're looking at developing something, a lot of people will naturally go to the lowest hanging fruit, right? Like that's an adage that everyone goes to. Something that I picked up that I prefer considerably is, instead of low hanging fruit, let's look at the wolves nearest the wagon. Instead of looking at the things that are the easiest for us to grab, let's look at the things that are going to fuck us up the fastest. And I think a lot of the time when you're looking at the value proposition that I bring as a strategic coach, a lot of these teams are rightfully saying that is not a wolf nearest the wagon. There are a lot of things that we need to tackle before we can chase that last 1 to 0.5% that strategic stuff gives us. Because at the end of the game, to Bren's infamous meme statement, like, it's an FPS game. If you get shot, you die. Like, if you have phenomenal fundamentals, you have incredibly mechanically skilled players, the incremental value of the strategy that I bring is not going to be the thing that is most critical to your success. You have to get those fundamentals down first. You have to make sure that your players are interacting correctly. You have to make sure that their schedules are in place and that they're functioning well as humans first. And then you can start looking at the stuff that I bring, right? You can start implementing these systems. You can start looking at chasing those 0.5%, the things that are going to give you trophies, not just wins.
Tom, and because you've witnessed a lot of teams throughout the years of casting, commentating, and whatnot, this is me. The innuendo of you being old as well, all over again. You know, do you wish you see a little bit more of deep game strategy from a lot of the teams? You know, I think from my experience in VCT or in many other leagues, it feels like it all comes a little bit too late in many circumstances. And let's be fair, the season is short. You don't have much time to find those half percentages to try and be the best. Because let's be fair, you're all playing at a very high level, right? And if you're all in very similar standing, the difference between winning and losing a game or qualifying to a global event can be very small. So, you know, how early would you say, how late maybe do you think teams are with all of this? How important do you place it in your mind as a commentator, as an analyst?
I think it varies from team to team. Like, I think you got to look at the fact that the franchise, at least in its essence, is still very, very young. So a lot of the teams that came in are doing the things that Anderzz is talking about on the other side of things. Like, you've got teams like, look at KC last season. You could have given all of Anderzz's strategies to KC and they still would have finished in the bottom half of the table. They built a rough team. So it's like, I feel like for Karmine Corp is a great example. This year, could he have helped with building the strategy? Yes, but right now they've got a load of rookies who, at the moment, that's not anywhere near the core of the issue. It's that they've got so many other things to do. Now, that's why he's been picked up in the past by teams like Fnatic, who they had everything down to a T. Now you need that extra couple of % to win you events. So I think that at least in EMEA, and I would say Americas as well, a lot of teams aren't even close to that. They are much closer to our team's fucked. Let's try and get someone who's going to be able to pick us up some good players and build a relationship between them.
Yeah, it could be all about putting out fires right now. You know, at the early stage with all these changes in rosters as well. Does it all gel together well and whatnot? But yes, if you can instantly jump in, and it's also tied into having that role, that specific role, and you knowing what you need to do. And it's not from team to team. Often we see that roles change a lot, don't we? But when a role is better defined and that player knows what he's doing and what he's good at, and then he can go to a team and sort of be solid in the idea that this is what my role is. This is what I do. Eventually, maybe the game gets a bit more streamlined, and then we go into more strategical way of thinking earlier on.
Older esports. I think you look at League of Legends, they have teams that have multiple coaches. It's not just one dude that leads the charge. And I think a few teams are getting in on that early, like Vitality have done that, where they have multiple people down the line. Someone who's there for management, someone's there as a head coach, someone's there as assistant coach, someone there as an analyst, and they all work together to build something. A lot of teams are still at the early stages where they go, we have a coach.
Yeah.
And then they've not put that extra finance into getting this other person. If they do, it will be a not very desirable amount. So I think that in a couple of years' time, like positions of what Anderzz is talking about will be incredibly valuable. But it's just that we are at day one, well, I guess day 2 of the franchise. Where we're getting an 11th team because of that. Our format's weird. Like, there's so many things that are going to get ironed out over time, and that's where he'll probably become one of the most valuable analysts there is at the moment.
Why, thank you. I think that, like, Tom's hitting the nail on the head, right? You can look that as not just the esport, but as the teams in the ecosystem mature over time, there is a clear trend towards what he is describing. Like, Fnatic is the objectively most successful team in the history of the game now. And what was the staff during that time frame? Mini as head coach, me as strategic coach. Like, you had SLK as the assistant coach. You had a performance coach with Ewan. Like, there was an actual staff there. Look at NRG, one of the strongest favorites, not just domestically in Americas, but for the entire world this coming year. They've got Chet at the top. They just announced Tanny at assistant coach, and they've got 2 analysts, which I forget their names. I apologize. Much respect for you. I hope you do awesome this year. But like,
Vlad.
Yeah, Vlad is one of the two. Like they're doing a very similar model, right? Like they have a full coaching staff behind their team. Like that is just the way things are going to trend, because the closer you get to the top, the smaller the margins are, and the more work is required to. It's like a case study in diminishing returns, right? You have to work your ass off to get there. Yeah, there we go. Vlad and your boy Slays. How could I forget such an iconic name? Oh, good lord. But yeah, I mean, this is like a perfect example, right? Like, as time goes on, teams are going to trend towards this, and the caliber of those people in the more peripheral roles of the coaching staff are oftentimes going to be some of the most defining contributions of a year of performance.
Mm-hmm. I feel like we could go very deep into this rabbit hole about game strategy, but before we do, I want to touch on what Tom said as well. Like, this is day 2 of VCT, right? This is only the start. Obviously, Riot Games have got a lot of experience developing an esport, and they've taken League of Legends quite far. Do you think what they're doing with Valorant now has, we're now, the release came out in 2020, right? That was when beta came out. Now VCT, with the partnership program, this is essentially the second year of it. Did you guys expect when Valorant came out for the product to be where it is today? Right now, it's been 4 years since the game released, 2 years since the partnership program existed. Tom, for you, the expectation here, do you think it's been matched?
I think that they've done things faster than even they expected to do, and I'd say that obviously with more insider information than most. I think the game has done incredibly well. Like it was created to rival Counter-Strike, which is a top 3 esport. Like, you're looking at League of Legends, Dota as the ones I'd put in the same sort of ballpark. And Valorant is very quickly getting into that sort of bracket. I think they've got to be over the moon with it, but you've also got to be careful that you don't blow things out of proportion and make it so that it's not going to actually benefit the game as well. So I do think that it's in a... Okay. Hey, you did too soon, man. A lot of people just got let go. That fucking joke. Jesus. Hey, a lot of good talent up for grabs. That's all I'm going to say. But no, I think that realistically, it's in a good spot. Obviously, there's a million things that could be improved. Like, you look towards the tier 2, and I think we've still got a long way to go. But as a tier 1 circuit with multiple international events, and I'll be honest, there hasn't been a single international event in Valorant I haven't been excited for. Not one. Like, every single one has broken the mold in terms of its production and its creativity, its storylines, its teams. Like, there's not one where I can't think of something and went, oh, that was sick. I love that. And it's only been getting better as the franchise has gone on. So I think that's going to continue. And with some of the local, fucking Madrid and Shanghai to kick off the year, it's going to be sick.
So cool.
It's so funny because I think sometimes with my work I miss out on some of the pageantry and just the coolness of Valorant as an esport. And when you're like, oh, the storylines, they totally broke the mold. I just randomly thought back to the promo reel, teaser video that they had before Masters Tokyo, and damn, this esport's fucking sick.
Yeah, it is.
Unironically, I was like, there's some really cool stuff that they do that I just don't take the time to appreciate enough. The events are genuinely phenomenal, and coming to this year, it's is everything perfect? Hell no. To Tom's point, tier 2 needs help. Riot knows that they need help. That's not going to change in the short term, but it feels like a lot of the criticism almost is you're at a track and field event. You grab someone from the stands and you're like, all right, you're doing the 50-meter sprint. They sprint, and then you start critiquing them on their form when they still managed to just do the sprint and actually run the race. We just managed to run the race. We're currently at viable ops. We've managed to do the thing. We need to go immediately shitting on us for the form of what that looked like is a little bit excessive, and you've got to understand that it's gonna come with time. There's still a build-up period here that is gonna be required to get where we want it to be.
Ideally, where would you guys see Valorant esports go in 2 years' time? Like, if the partnership has existed for 2 years, where do you guys see it? I'll go to Anderzz first here. On
14 teams. Oh wait, that's what they said.
Well, I think that the biggest thing for me is like I just want to see what the steady state operations of these leagues is going to look like. Like, we have these like guest teams, these invite teams, the ascended teams. What does that look like when we're actually at like not an awkward 11 team format? What does it look like when we're actually at the quote unquote run rate of we have a max amount of teams in the league, we're running a like presumably fairly stable tier 2. I don't mean stable in the sense that like the thing that Leo got flamed over, but like stable in the terms of like there's a very consistent format, there's a very consistent schedule, we understand how everything runs and operates. For me, like that's what matters the most, and what I want to see is like just what does the format end up looking like when we don't have all of these moving parts and sort of build up processes in place. And to be fair, like I don't know 100% what that looks like, because I think the way that I would answer that question is going to change probably every single year as we see like the next step in a lot of those processes added to the puzzle.
Yeah, and by that time we'll have team like in 2 years' time we'll have a team that has made it. Gentlemates will have to be gone by that time, right? It will no longer be in VCT MEA, and another Ascension team will have taken its place. So picture the scenario where Gentlemates win VCT 2025. Actually, it's not possible they win 2026. We don't know if that's actually possible. They might have an insane roster and they do insanely well. They go to a global event, they do insanely well, go to the final, maybe even win it. Is it good for the sport for Gentlemates as an organization no longer be in that league that next year? Is that something you've thought about already, Tom? Considering the news of this format has existed for a while now?
The thing is, I don't think anybody truly knows how the relegation is actually going to work. I will assume that either it will be that the players themselves end up on another org almost immediately, or it's going to be something where maybe there'll be some sort of contingency plan of like, okay, if you win the entire thing, maybe we'll do something about it. But I do think that, in my opinion, I used to love the way that it was done within ESL, and it's a little bit more brutal, but it's like, if you won the Mountain Dew League, you then played the bottom teams, and if you won, then you swapped. And I think that could be a cooler way to do it, which is just like, okay, you mentioned Gentlemates. So say they're the best team in the world. Okay, well, yeah, it's rough for the team that's coming up, but they have to play in a bracket with the two teams that would be coming down and the team that's going up. And if they win, they get to go up. It's brutal, but it would mean that they earn their place in the league. And also it would mean that those people actually get to defend themselves from upcoming players. Or maybe you take that relegation team and you put them in the Ascension and see if they can win it. If they win the whole thing, then they get to keep their spot. I think that's a more fun way to do it. But again, it also then puts a spot of like, well, if a team was grinding for a whole year and then they lose to the team that was already in the league, that's also kind of brutal. So there's no great way to do it, but there's definitely ways that could make it quite exciting.
Yeah, I think that's all we could sort of add on that topic in that regard. But yeah, VCT kicking off, awesome. We'll finally get to see some more Valorant, get to see some storylines unfold, or see if all these roster moves have worked out, see who will be coming on top, if anybody can challenge Fnatic in the EMEA, who will be on top in terms of regions. Will we see multiple international or global events picked up by a single team again? We'll have to wait and see on that. So it's exciting to see that start. But yeah, entering our next subtopic, which we already dived into, it's game strategy and how far we go with game strategy. And for the basic viewer, it's not far at all. Right, for the player that plays for a player that is strictly going in their comp games on average, is ranked in gold or plat or silver, right, and just watches an esports event that from time to time, don't have to think about it very deeply. Make sure you've got all roles covered, get your controller in there, don't be annoying and pick up 5 duelists, or run 5 duelists for the hell of it. Why not? But there's there's always that the cap of where strategy goes is really far. And I think, Anderzz, you are a person that has gone, you're one of the people that have probably gone furthest, right, to that extent. So
to the bottom of the iceberg.
You've gone to the bottom of the iceberg. You've crossed, you've been through all the trenches, you've gone to the bottom of each sea that it could possibly be. How deep does it go for you as well from here? And do you limit yourself sometimes? Do you get, overwhelmed sometimes with a thought, oh, am I going too deep here? When does it stop for you?
It doesn't. Like, that's ultimately the secret to it, is like, and this is like largely based in a lot of my personal like research and interest in not just game strategy, but like military theory. The depth of strategy is directly proportional to the innovation of your opponent. And so as long as your opponent doesn't stop working, there is no bottom. Like, you are going to keep going deeper. That's just how it's going to work. And so for me, like, to sort of touch on a few of the things you mentioned, like, I don't think that there's ever a point where like I worry about going too deep or like getting to a point of overwhelming myself. What I do have to keep in mind is, where is the point of diminishing returns versus what I think is realistically retainable from a player perspective, because I will go as deep down this rabbit hole as I possibly can. What I sort of transmit over to the players is not going to be remotely the same level of depth. I'm going to, like, one of the things that I often describe is like, I have spreadsheets upon spreadsheets of like pretty deep quantitative data. I have complex systems models that I use to understand certain concepts. I'm never going to show those to a player. Literally not once, because that shit doesn't matter to them. What I'm going to tell the player is the like 2-sentence conclusion that's like that has 40 hours of work behind it. And that's what matters to them. And so what's the depth of that strategy? Well, it took me an entire work week to get there. But in terms of the practical application, it's like a fairly linear like conclusion that I can just hand off to a player to improve their decision making and improve the way that like we're approaching a map or whatever. And I mean, people will probably look at that statement and be like, well, you're making it way too complicated. How do you take 40 hours to get to a sentence? And it's like, that fundamentally misunderstands how good strategy is developed. I can look at like how a protocol works with the way that like we're supposed to flank on a specific map under certain circumstances, and then I can distill that down to 3 sentences. And that is an entire case study in like how rotations work on the map, common play patterns in reaction to flanks, common play patterns in reaction to like retakes where we aren't flanking. And like that is an entire week process if you're doing it correctly. I hate to break it to everybody, but like that's just how it's going to work out. And that can be distilled down to a simple actionable form. That doesn't mean that I'm like being unnecessarily convoluted in my analysis. That just means that I'm actually taking all of the factors into consideration.
I'll get to you, Tom. I'll get back to you, Tom, as well here, because obviously you're both analysts in a way, but your jobs are very different. What Anderzz, what is most difficult about this whole process that you just described for you? Is it all the work that it takes, or actually distilling it to just a couple of sentences or a few words to make it more fathomable, more understandable for players? Or is there something in there that is a little bit more complex that takes a lot of your time, or for you find most challenging?
There's that classic saying of like, if you can't explain something in a sentence, you don't actually understand it. And I think that is always going to be the hardest part of sort of the job that I do. It's also coincidentally the number one piece of feedback I give to like aspiring analysts and coaches who reach out to me for stuff. They'll be like, hey, here's like my 20-page Google Doc anti-strat. And I'm like, I'm gonna be completely honest. If you can't distill this down to 1 page, I don't give a shit. If you hand this to a head coach, they're going to tell you to fuck off unless it's understandable in like 3 paragraphs. Because that's just completely impractical and useless. Like, that is the bottom line, is all of your theory could be correct. Your analysis could be superb. There could be a deep wealth of knowledge in the document that you provided. But if I can't understand it quickly, the players aren't going to understand it quickly, and it's not going to be useful. And so you can be the best analyst in the world. If you can't distill it down to something actionable, it's all useless. So that is the hardest part. It's the most important part. And it's the thing that requires the most sort of skill and experience in order to do effectively across like a myriad of scenarios.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Now, back to you, Tom, here. Obviously, analysis and breaking down topics in a understandable way is something that is part of your job, right? You may understand something to a deep level, but unless you don't convey it in a coherent manner, it won't matter, right? It will become mumbo jumbo. It will become confusing. How do you tackle that? And how deep do you actually go into understanding these topics?
That's always the parallel. It's like, obviously, I think, I don't know if I've watched as much Valorant as Anderzz has, but I'd say in comparison to most people, I've watched quite a lot. And it's basically, rather than more so like taking all of that time and sort of, as he said, like putting it into a sentence, that's basically what color commentary is. It's like, I have to look at a round, look at what a team is doing, and then say it in a way that's explainable to someone who's played 10 minutes. And that's like, sometimes that will work, sometimes it won't. And you also have to remember as a analyst that you could show something that to someone like Anderzz, he'd go, wow, that is genius. But on a broadcast, it's worthless because he's not the audience. The audience is the 99%. So you've got to explain something clever in the dumbest way possible, or at least in a way that is understandable to everyone else. I think that is one of the bigger challenges, is because, like, as a commentator, I've watched and casted thousands of hours. Something that might seem very simple is a lot more complex than you actually realize. And then you basically have to go, okay, I'll explain it like I'm 5. That's the saying. It's like you try and simplify something enough so that then it is accessible to everyone, but also the people who are hardcore fans aren't going to go like, why is he explaining a smoke to me? Like, it's like it's a fine balance, because you don't want the hardcore fans to think you're an idiot, but you don't want all the like newer fans who are coming in watching the game for the first time to go, oh wait, he's just talked about a guiding light, a curveball, and all these ridiculous things that at an eye test you don't know what they are. So it is almost an art form in itself. Is like, you have to find that middle ground so that you're not upsetting the hardcores and you're not alienating the new people.
Mm-hmm.
The hardest part of my job is his entire job, and he has to do it in real time.
and that's the levels to it, right? Obviously, and as you'll go deeper, so you'll be able to find those advantages. That's your job, right? For Tom's job isn't to.
I don't have enough to go deep.
You don't have time to go deep, but it's also not your job to try and figure out what's the best way to tackle, a team. And now I just heard it, and I'll just walk past it like I've never heard it. I'll let it breathe for a second. Okay,
looking quite
there's
red
a different levels to it, right? Sorry.
You're looking quite red at the moment. Did I get you in that one, Pavlos?
I get very red. I don't know if you've seen any of the episodes, but I get very, very red generally as well.
Oh lordy.
Yeah, like there's the strategic coach, the strategic analyst, then there's and the main coach and whatnot. Then there's the analyst, the broadcast analyst itself, and then there's the color caster, which you are, Tom, and then there's even the play-by-play. Right, for the play-by-play, it even becomes more complex.
Morons.
Exactly, that's me. You have to filter out so much information, but at the same time, you need to be able to pick out in milliseconds and seconds out of all the chaos that is transpiring.
You have to say only fins instead of only fans. Luckily, no one would ever make that mistake on a broadcast.
Luckily, no one does. You have to actually come up with what is most important in that moment, which is also different in itself. Like, personally, I'm a play-by-play. I haven't gone to the depth that Anderzz has, right? Tom doesn't think he does either. And I'd say I'd
be
further
wasting
that
my
and
time
say
if I did.
Exactly.
He'd be doing his job poorly if he did. Like, to be
100%.
fair, it's antithetical to what his goals are. So like,
which for me is the exact same. And as far as a broadcast analyst and a color caster, I won't spend my time as much as they are on composition strategy within a map. I will, obviously to make sure that I have a great understanding of what a team is doing, so I can convey that in that moment as quickly as possible. But to the extent that, you know, an analyst won't, I'll spend my time on finding more creative ways of making it entertaining, or keeping people attached to the game, or making it all coherent, or stories, essentially, right? Because we're talking about players at the end of the day, whether we're talking about little pawns on a chessboard moving around and trying to figure out the optimal way of getting the checkmate, getting the win. There's also a player behind it moving those pawns, and each pawn is a player. So that player has...
Who exactly are you calling a pawn? Just if you were to name names.
Pawns have usually got a round and shiny head. I feel like it's quite self-explanatory.
I'm not a player, so you can't use me. Are you referring to Durka then?
Oh, maybe.
He also is Durka a pawn. I guess that's what the episode can be called. Pavlos calls Durka a pawn. There you go.
Clickbait at its finest. But yeah, there is so much to analysis and what you want to filter out and whatnot, and it's always going to be depending on where you are and how you taking that information in, what's important for you, etc. Finally, Anderzz, you know, how do you go about simplifying all of this information, right? Let's take it from the most extreme level, which you are currently. From the three of us, you've taken this to the most extreme. How do you go about simplifying it?
Yeah.
Oh, Tom, God damn it, stop it.
And how do you, like,
we're not bringing you on again.
Back after it's been that deep.
I think that I'm just actually stunned laughing now. I think a huge part of it is just like a lot of what I do is understanding the why of something needs to happen. And the distillation process is just what needs to happen. Like, you don't need the question, really. You just need the answer. Is sort of an interesting way to look at it.
42.
Yeah, exactly. That's all you need. I think that's sort of what the process is in its simplest form. I say, like, here are the circumstances of a map. What do they dictate we need to do? Why do they dictate that we need to do that? And then I give the player not the result of that entire process, but just the what do we do part of it. And that, in a lot of ways, is fairly easy to distill once you frame it in that sort of setup.
Cool. All right. Tom, anything to add in that regard? Obviously, you have to break it down all the time. It's, you know, there's always a balance between what a viewer wants to listen to, and it's always a matter of taste, right? So for a commentator here, it's, you know, you've got to decide, because what I remember from your cast with Mitch, you also take the hybrid approach, where you both follow up on color, you both follow up on play-by-play. So how do you personally choose to... When do you choose to convey storylines? When do you choose to convey a piece of analysis? When is it important for viewers to hear each moment, each piece of information?
I think a lot of it comes down to severity of the match. Like, if a game is an opening match, a lot of it's going to be like it will be at kickoff, sort of explaining the changes from last season, giving people the information to sort of understand everything that's going to be going on format-wise, and then just having a bit of fun with it. And then also, like, obviously when it gets to qualification games, then you're talking about the stakes, you're talking about the stories, you're talking about what these people are aiming to achieve, what they have been grinding for throughout their entire careers. And that's where the game sort of changes, is, okay, if there's a ticket to Madrid in the next 3 hours, yeah, maybe you talk a little bit more about the severity of the game. If this could be the first team out of the tournament, maybe you go, ooh, shit, this isn't going that great.
Cool. 100%. All right. I think that's all for our topics today. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Where can people find you apart from your Twitters there? Is there any content coming out? Anderzz, Tom, you both got YouTube channels that you post on occasionally. Shout them out. Tom, you go first.
I think my YouTube channel is called Tombizz Valorant. I should know the answer to that. But, just
It's a very
search the
frequent
name
uploading.
Tombizz. I upload all the time. I might even upload tomorrow. You'll know. Well, I actually think I will. There you go. I'll do another pick and video
hot
because
damn.
everyone loves a pick and video.
Damn. What a
I
treat.
definitely didn't record them all in the same day, and I'm just staggering when I upload them. Would never do that.
What about you, Anderzz?
My YouTube is the exact same as my Twitter handle, Anderzz TV.
Convenient.
Branding continuity. Thumbs up.
Great.
Other than that, I mean, as mentioned, where I am teamless, my entire income is my Patreon. So I have a bunch of stuff on that Patreon / Anderzz TV. I do tier lists with every single patch. I do premiere focused playbooks every single patch. A lot of people will be familiar with the Coach Potato stuff that Minnie and Sliggy do. Fun fact, I had been doing that for 9 months when they launched that Patreon. So super similar content. I'm in the midst of finishing up an Icebox. So if you're interested in the protocols and the playbook from someone who's internationally undefeated on the map, I got you covered.
So a lot of nerdy stuff to be found at Anderzz, and a lot of this team's trash because XYZ from Tom.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I also have a Patreon, but you have to find that it's hidden.
You probably have an OnlyFins or something as well to bring out a reference from before. All right, thank you for tuning in, everybody. We'll be back next week, not the same day. We'll be back actually on Thursday because we'll have for the first time a live podcast. It won't be remote, so that'll be really cool. Make sure you follow us at Skill Issues live on Instagram, TikTok, Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, X, or whatever you want to call that as well. We haven't uploaded a single TikTok yet. We're sorry. We will, though. We'll get on it. So, yeah, go follow us on all of that. And see you next time.